Welcome, Gunrunner.
As I continue my greatest of all time videos, it's surprising just how many hugely popular formats I still have left to cover, and they don't get any bigger, or should that be smaller, than the Nintendo Game Boy. It wasn't the first handheld console, that honour goes to the Milton Bradley Microvision, but it was the one that launched the big craze for portable games machines that we saw at the very end of the 80s, arriving just a few months before the colour Atari Lynx. And it put Nintendo on a path to handheld domination that continues right into the present day. As with previous greatest of all time videos, I put the big question to the members of several large retro gaming groups on Facebook, including the hugely popular and very lively Retro Gaming Hysteria, link in the description for those who want to join, as well as my own loyal subscribers, asking them to name their top 5 and the reasons why. Following the same rules as before, I awarded 5 points to your first choice, 4 points to second, and so on and so forth. I then counted up those votes to decide the final placings, and in the case of games having the same number of points, I then went to the number of votes awarded, followed by the number of first place votes to decide the final ranking. However, I didn't actually need to use these tiebreakers until I hit the wider top 40, which, as always, will be available as a Patreon exclusive video at the start of next month. Now, in terms of any themes I spotted in the voting process, there honestly weren't that many surprises. Perhaps maybe a couple of games that you might not expect outside of the top 10, which I think my grandma could have predicted, and she's dead and knows nothing about gaming. The one thing that did surprise me was the actual voting process itself. Firstly, because I received an absolutely huge amount of votes for this one, perhaps the largest amount for any video I've done thus far. Yep, I know the Game Boy was hugely popular back in the day, but whenever I make videos about it, they seem to do terribly. And secondly, because there were loads of people who just didn't understand the question, even with a picture of a Game Boy attached, and just listed their top 5 games of all time. Not sure what triggered this stupidity, as it's never been a problem in the past. So now's the time to see if, along with my dead nan, you predicted that top 10 too, as we start the countdown in the 20 greatest Nintendo Game Boy games of all time.
The adult world is designed to keep us moving, and while this may make us more efficient, it's not exactly a party. Luckily, technology has produced a cure. It's called a Game Boy, the personal game-playing system from Nintendo, with lots of sports, action, and puzzle games to choose from. And it comes with a puzzle game Tetris. It could change your outlook.
I'm sorry, sir. Your flight's been delayed. Cool.
Game Boy by Nintendo. Have you had your fun today?
I was so pleased to see Konami's amazing Motocross Maniacs make the top 20, because it's long been one of my favourite Game Boy games and one that I have a lot of nostalgia for, but also one that I feel is criminally underrated by many fans of the classic portable. The first of 4 Batman games for the Game Boy, and one of 2 by Sunsoft, this has long been regarded as the best of the bunch, as it perfectly combines elements of adventuring, fighting and platforming, whilst providing great graphics and even more outstanding sound. Also known to European gamers as Mystic Quest, this is a special Game Boy exclusive spin-off from the Final Fantasy franchise, and also the first game in the Mana series. This game is actually inspired by Zelda in an effort to make an RPG that was more action oriented. Another personal favourite of mine that is also my favourite Mario themed game, Dr. Mario might not have quite the same prestige as Tetris, but it's a much more nuanced puzzler that has remained one of Nintendo's most beloved franchises through the decades. Not to be confused with the Mega Man 2 that appeared on the NES, this is a sequel to the specially designed Game Boy spin-off Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge. The second of 5 Mega Man games that appeared on the handheld, it was by far your favourite one. Another famous franchise that made its way over to the Game Boy from the NES, this handheld exclusive sequel is certainly a lot better than the one that appeared for its big brother, and was widely praised on release for being a huge step up from the first Castlevania. Created by Rare, Donkey Kong Land was an attempt to create a handheld version of the hugely popular SNES game Donkey Kong Country. Like its sibling, this is a scrolling platformer that uses pre-rendered visuals to display the action, but that technique is a lot less obvious here. Vertically scrolling shoot-em-ups often suffered on the Game Boy because of the screen blur, making it hard to see the bullets. But the exception to that rule is the amazing Solar Striker, that uses bold but minimalistic graphics to avoid that happening, with great music to boot. The first game by HAL on this list, Revenge of the Gator has long been regarded as the Game Boy's best pinball game, so I'm glad to see it secure its legacy on this list. With great ball physics and inventive table design and addictive gameplay, you can't go far wrong here. It might not be anywhere near as good as the second Castlevania game on the Game Boy, but it does seem to be better remembered by the people who voted on this poll, as this title, which represents one of Konami's earliest Game Boy games, just misses out on the top 10. People always talk about Mario and Donkey Kong when it comes to Nintendo's platforming mascots, but there was a time when we also had Kirby, who built up a big cult following, and this Game Boy game was one reason why. It's definitely time for this guy to make a comeback. When so many home versions of Double Dragon failed to live up to the magic of the original arcade game, the Game Boy version absolutely excels, as rather than a straight port, Technos chose to design a special handheld edition and couldn't have done it better. I think a lot of people forget that the first Wario game appeared on the Game Boy, as a third title in the Super Mario Land series. It was this game that made us all fall in love with Mario's greatest rival, and he would then become a mainstay in Nintendo lore going forward. Released some 13 years after the original Donkey Kong arcade game and sharing the same name, this is actually an update on that famous coin-op rather than a conversion. As well as adding a host of extra levels, this was also the first title to have specific Super Game Boy enhancements. Created as a sequel to the original Metroid that appeared on the NES some 5 years before, this one is subtitled The Return of Samus, and follows a very similar game design. It remains one of the best selling games released for the original Game Boy and was later remade for the 3DS. I bet you were all waiting for Pokemon to appear on this list, and here it is. But I should point out that this entry actually combines all three games released for the Game Boy, Red, Blue and Yellow, as many of you just said Pokemon and didn't actually specify which variation. Subtitled 6 Golden Coins, this Super Mario Land sequel was actually quite a long time coming, as it arrived 3 years after the original game that persuaded so many people to invest in the handheld. It improves on the original in every single way, but narrowly misses a podium spot. One of the best decisions Nintendo made with the Game Boy was having a Mario game ready for launch. Based on the original Super Mario Bros., but specially designed with the handheld in mind, this game was responsible for selling more consoles than any other. The Game Boy wouldn't be a Nintendo console without a Zelda game, and many people consider Link's Awakening to be one of the very best. The game proved so popular that an enhanced DX version was released for the Game Boy Color in 1998. I think we all knew that this was going to claim the #1 spot, didn't we? It came bundled with the Game Boy, so it's obvious it would be the best remembered game. But it's also the perfect handheld title, and still many people's all-time favourite version of Tetris too.
Are coming! But wait! Super Mario is here! This time on Game Boy! It's portable, it's in stereo, and its games are interchangeable. On Game Boy, Mario faced his whole new worlds, like the mysteries of ancient Egypt and the horrors of the deep. Super Mario Land! Just one of the great games out now on Game Boy!
And that rounds out my look at the 20 greatest Nintendo Game Boy games of all time. But which games were you most surprised not to see make the final list? Or are there any games that you don't think were worthy of inclusion on this countdown? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons and YouTube backers for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following people in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Paul Daniel, Mins, Lost Gamerman, Luke MC, Carl Olsen, Seth Robinson, Frosty, Mark Strickland, Kalimatorn, Trogdor the Burninator, Daniel Skoronsky, Ben P. Stein, Tabby Kitsune, David Maddox, Your Eyes Are Bleeding, Joe Casara, Classic Gamer 74, Bernard Santu, Peter Grantham, Noah Mann, Josh Hartman, and Electron Star Claps. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now, where you can get access to host extra content including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.